right, we are live, and we welcome everybody to our weekly podcast, Not Your Ordinary Church, a place where you can find a church that is not like every other. And we try to talk about issues that are not just classic Churchianity. We really want you to know the truth. And so we welcome you here, and we invite you to ask questions in the comment section below your screen, and we will monitor those questions, and we will answer those if they are pertinent and related to the topic. We ask that you try to keep them on topic so that we can keep a flow to this. We don't have a 3-hour podcast, and so we try to answer as much importance as we can. So we'll just go ahead and get started.
Before we do, I do have one thing that I want to throw in there.
Okay.
We're going to be talking about God and science, and so it's very, very important to understand. And one of my rules, the 12th commandment, is thou shalt not be pretentious. And so we are not scientists. We're not pretending to be scientists. We're just looking at, from our experience, from my experience of 37 years of being a Christian, having conversations with various people. So we're not trying to pretend that we're scientists, but we are going to deal with this issue. Well, I'm going to deal with this issue. I don't know what he's going to do, but hopefully he'll follow me. And it'll be it'll be very layman. It'll be in lay terms. We're not going to try to pretend to be anything other than what we really are. Okay.
You stole my intro. Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Anyway, yes, like he said, we are not scientists, but this is often a question we come across, and so we want to try and, or I should say a topic we come across. People, there is a confusion when it comes to the issues of God and science, and there's a lot of debate between the two subjects. And so we want to just try and touch on some of the basics, maybe create a little bit of a foundation, a little bit of an understanding of how we view science, how God is related to science, and how science is related to God. And so we'll just start. Basically, the question that inspired this is often, actually, I've come across a lot of people. As a matter of fact, I've just had a person last week when we were talking about the issues of truth. They said, I believe that truth is not relative, and that you can't just decide what's right and wrong. You have to have some kind of moral standard. But then this person prefaced the whole thing by saying, but I do believe in science. And so it was almost like there was a cutoff point. We were talking about truth and morality and God and Christianity, and then all of a sudden it was like, but I believe in science. And so it was like this cutoff point. And that's what I want to start with. There's many people who would say, I don't believe in God, I believe in science. And I'm sure you've heard that before. And so I want to ask you that question. What do you say to somebody, or what would be your answer to somebody, your response to somebody who asks you that question? Maybe don't just that direct question, because right. I know this can go a million miles.
Yeah.
But
the main thing, I would say the main thing is that it assumes that the two are incompatible. And that's, I think, where I have the big problem, is the idea of being incompatible. Because science is empirical, it only deals with things that we can see, that we can observe. That automatically puts them in two different classes. And so it would be like, to me, saying I don't believe in God, I believe in science, would be like saying I don't believe in God, I only believe in the arts. They're just on two different wavelengths. They're not, they don't, the one doesn't contradict the other.
Okay, and so that's actually perfect segue into the next question, which is how can you believe in something that you cannot see or even prove exists scientifically? Because the truth is, you can't necessarily use scientific formulas to pull God out of the air and say, oh, hey, this thing you couldn't see before, here he is, scientifically proven. We've run hypotheses and experiments, and now here is the physical demonstration of God. How do you believe in something that is not seeable?
Everybody does that. It's not just specific to God. Everybody believes in things that are not seeable. Like there are people that believe in being moral, and there's no physical evidence for a necessity of morality. So My attitude is, you're limiting the argument by trying to claim that somehow believing in God is you have to ignore what you
Well,
see.
hold on. Let me stop you there though, because just on the subject of morality, that's a good point to kind of. That's actually a very good question. Does science, uh, uh, you know, determine morality? In a sense, no, but in a sense, yes. At the same time, like we talked last week about the guy, that doesn't have knowledge of the tracks, and gets on the tracks and runs into the tunnel, doesn't know about the train, and is ignorant of these things, but suffers the consequences of them. Science kind of shows you the physical consequences for not having some kind of moral standard, what is right and what's wrong.
I don't think that's true.
No,
No, I don't. I don't believe that science even addresses the issue of morality
but you have the physical
at
results,
all.
though, right?
But that's not from a moral standpoint. Those are the physical things. Like you can't sit down and, you can be in a room with people and you can observe them and stuff. But there's so many factors involved. You could have somebody who's completely and utterly has no morals whatsoever, and he's still going to be able to have a good day. He's still going to be able to go through life. He's still going to be able to go to the bank and take money out of the bank. I mean, he's going to still be able to work a job, and it's not a requirement to have this moral stand. You can not believe in morals and still kind of watch yourself, so you don't get in trouble. You don't have to. In other words, what I'm saying is so somebody going to the bank and taking out money and those kinds of things. Yeah, somebody like that's going to be more capable of pulling underhanded things. But if he's not going to get what he wants, then there are going to be things he's not going to do simply because he's not going to get what he wants. And so he will play the game in order to get what he wants. So that's my point, is the idea is there's no matter how much research you do, you cannot research that people have to have this type of a moral stand in order to be able to be this kind of a person. You can't, there's no test that can prove that. That's what I'm talking about, is there's no, and again, like I said, I'm not a scientist, so I'm not talking about that I am a scientist, but I think it's kind of matter of fact in so many ways that people have friends with people who they don't really agree with their morality, but they're still friends. You may be the kind of person that wants to save yourself to marriage, for example, and you can still hang out with people that are promiscuous. So there's nothing that dictates that you have to have X type of morality in order to be able to function in life. And that's what I mean when I talk about it from the scientific standpoint. It doesn't address the issue. Science doesn't address morals. They're not seen. The root of morals is an unknown.
So, why should somebody feel obligated to?
Or I should say unseen.
Yeah. So why should anyone really feel any kind of obligation to believe in something you can't see? Because when you think about it, science has kind of led us in a direction technologically over the years, and it's been like this cause and effect thing over the years. We experiment on things. We medicine, all these areas of the scientific studies, the physical study of the natural world, and we find out how to cure things. We find out how to make things. We find out how to make things work, how to make things work better, and it's all physical. It's all right in front of you. And so even down to morals, like why should anyone feel obligated to, some kind of moral standard that's set by somebody you can't see or meet?
Well, that was my point about the idea of believing in something that you can't see anyway. Is everybody believes in things that they can't see? That was my point.
Okay, I see.
Everybody believes in things that they cannot see already. So to make an argument to say I cannot believe in God because I can't see him is a non-argument, because there are lots of things in life that we believe that we can't see. You might say it's the rope that hangs the non-believer. But to say things like, well, yeah, but we can observe the consequences or the results of things. Like the thought that came to my mind is, you can't see love. You can't see it. You can't put it in a lab and test it and say this is nope. That's definitely the definition of love. You can't see that because love it has such an unseen level in the human personality. Some people they love, but they don't have any emotion to show that love. Some people they don't really love, but they're very emotional. So you can't see. And so the argument, well, yeah, but if you watch and observe, you can see signs and indicators, and you can figure things out like that. Yeah, but it's still not talking about sight. It's talking about intuition. It's talking about putting some things together.
So, how do you? I mean, love is a really interesting thing because you feel physical things when it comes to. I mean, obviously, love is not, well, without going into the whole definition of love, but like, isn't love kind of just a feeling? Like it's a physical, physiological feeling. It's something inside your body that happens.
Well, at now we're switching to more senses, and so we were originally talking about not being able to see it.
Right.
So
but it's a sensory thing. So you can
well,
feel, you can touch, you can
yeah.
see it physically. You can observe it with your senses.
Yeah, I'm just saying it's a different question because now you're saying senses, okay? Because we do feel things that we don't see. And so now we're talking about just beyond the five senses, life beyond the five senses.
Yeah.
Again,
I probably should have prefaced the question
yeah,
in that way.
again, the moral aspect is not a five senses thing. That's still outside of the realm of senses because morals are more internal. They're ways of thinking. They're ways of behaving. They're the root of why we do what we do, but that's not based on any of our senses. And so it's still the argument of I can't believe in something that I cannot detect with my senses is still a problem to the issue of morals. And I think everybody, I've yet to meet anybody like this. I'm not saying that they don't exist, but I've yet to meet anybody who is completely amoral. In other words, they don't have any idea of morals in their thinking at all. There's no such person that I've ever met who I can say that they were definitely 100% amoral. Even people that are sociopathic still have that element that other non-sociopathic people see as being immoral, not amoral. Because if they do horrible things to people, they take advantage of people, then we use that. We use that as a complaint about somebody. Oh, they're just a sociopath. Which means it's a bad thing. But the truth is if there is no God, then being a sociopath is not a bad thing. It's just a defective.
Isn't that somebody just
evolution.
with more or less feeling? So
Who?
if we're talking about a sociopath, like somebody who just has less feeling on things, like what? How do you describe? Talking about sensory things again.
Yeah.
Like because science is the study again of the physical, and so the sensory part aren't morals still a part of the sensory?
No, no.
Okay.
Because the senses are feeling it. It's touch, taste, smell. All those kinds of things here, sight, and so that doesn't come into morals. I mean, I'm morally bound to not smell this. I'm not morally bound to touch this.
Right.
I mean, yes, there are some instances where they overlap, but by generally speaking, that's not the case. You're not morally bound to not do something because of your senses. And that's the point that I'm making, is that you can have a moral outlook whereby you will not look at something, or you will not touch something, or you will not, any of the senses. But the moral is what makes the decision for the senses, not the other way around. And so it's not this, okay, I touched this and I've made a moral decision that I'm not going to touch it anymore because my sense of touch showed me this was wrong to touch this.
So where do
morally
so
speaking?
where do morals come from then? If not from the physical, where do morals
That's my point.
Yeah. So where?
Yeah, that's my point. We don't know.
Okay. Okay.
This is the big thing. Some people say it's a societal thing. We're kind of getting away from science here, but this is the argument about morals, is that kind of drops into two things. Some people believe it's a social construct. Other people believe that it comes from God. And so, but nobody believes that it comes from the senses. That's kind of what my point is as far as the scientific element of it.
Okay. Okay. Actually, that's not completely off track, because where my next question is, when you come to science, you have like this, okay, so just the process of science. You see something that in your mind eventually, at first glance is chaotic, right? Unexplainable, confusing, the stars, for instance, the way that plants grow, simple things like that, up to complicated things. There's this chaos, and then through hypothesis and experimentation and time, you put this effort into figuring out how, and figuring out how to reproduce things, and so you have this chaos that kind of becomes a little bit more order, if that makes sense.
Knowledge, you learn stuff about
Right,
it.
exactly. So that becomes order in your mind. When it comes to
Understandable.
yes,
Yeah.
okay. So when it comes to the issue of God, though, you have this super advanced, what we call in Christianity eternal being that's beyond time and space, super chaotic, super confusing, especially to somebody that isn't grown up in religion. They look at it and like, what in the world is this God thing? They grow up, and the schools obviously aren't teaching God, so typically they're teaching science, and so there's almost like this division between the two, and so you see this big chaotic thing, and how do you bring that down to order? Because if you look at it, when you start to look into just God, you God, Google religion, stuff like that, all you see is chaos, it seems. And so how do you convince somebody that sees that chaos, and as they try to make sense of it, all they see is religions that conflict with each other, societies that have ideas about God that are way out in left field. I mean, even far out from societal structures that are like, this is normal society and this is really crazy society, people killing each other and wars. And how do you convince somebody who's so used to the scientific chaos into order, and then go to chaos that just seems to become more chaos in the human mind?
That isn't God. Everything that you just described has nothing to do with God whatsoever. Yes, it's been done in the name of God, but it isn't God. And that's the problem. Is a lot of the debates that I have watched have all devolved into that kind of a thing. It's a question of religion. It's a question of the validity of religion. It isn't a question of God or the existence of God. And that's, I think, where the problem comes in, is because the idea of science and scientific experiment and those kinds of things they're not incompatible with God, but they are incompatible with religion. And we found that over the years, because there have been religious presuppositions is the word. I was trying to think of something a little simpler, but that's the word, that when like particularly with astronomy, you're going to be kicked out of the church, for believing that kind of stuff. We're going to excommunicate you because that goes against the Bible. But yet here we are today with the proof and the evidence that that idea was wrong, but yet we still have Christianity, we still have the Bible, and we still have the compatibility between those things. What was learned was the idea or the practice of the religion got out of hand. And that was the problem, is that it took things for granted based on ignorance. No, this is what the Bible says, because of a belief. So the belief was there beforehand, like the idea of the earth being flat, the earth revolving around the sun, the sun moving around the earth, those kinds of things. Those were the presuppositions. Like, I wish I could find another word. It's not as big word, but that's it. It started from there. That the belief was that the Bible taught these things, but the Bible doesn't teach those things. And we can look at the Bible today and we can compare it with what we have come to understand scientifically. And that's not the case. It's not, there's not that kind of, so it's not a thing of, we need to change this in the Bible. The same words are still there. But what we've come to understand is that that's not what it was saying. Like the idea of, sunrise. Okay. Even to this day, we still say that. We call it sunrise, but it's no such thing. It's Earth rotation. And so why don't we, this is not I'm not the original of this, but why don't we say that? Why don't we say today's Earth rotation is going to reveal the sun at 5:30 this morning? Why do we still call it sunrise? Because we know what we're talking about. We have all the understanding now to understand what we mean when we say the word sunrise. But we don't have to change the word. We just have to define the word properly. And we know that when we say sunrise, that's not what we're talking about. So that's the idea, is that all this stuff that you're talking about is just interpretations of religion. It's not about God and the existence of God. That is very much a topic of the ability to look into from an intellectual standpoint. You mentioned the word chaos, so I'm kind of putting things back on track from the question. But so that's the idea. So the idea of chaos and the idea of, I can speak out of my own personal experience with 37 years, is that the idea of God in the very beginning was there was a chaotic element of it, because I was raised in a home where we didn't believe in God. There was no God. And so, I mean, it wasn't not the Christopher Hitchens, there was no God and I hate him. It just was no God, And so that's just the way I was raised. I was raised that, at best, God was a force of nature, at the very best. And so didn't have any personality. I never heard the story of Jesus. I never, any of those kinds of things. The first time I even heard of a church or going to church, the first time I went was at 16. So my point being is that in the beginning, it was very, very chaotic, because all of a sudden this just lands in my worldview. Wow, I have to consider the idea of the existence of God, which I never had to do before. And so now I have to. And so I experimented with it. It was like, okay, let's see how this fits. Let's see how it works. And over 37 years, that has just become more and more clear. Even in the very beginning of my salvation, I'd say within the first 6 months of my salvation, there were still points where it's like, yeah, but is this entirely true? I mean, it's even though the things I was experiencing, the things I was learning, the things I was understanding were there, and I had various evidences, consistency of evidences. There would still be the mental, and it purely mental, logical. Yeah, but is there another explanation for this? So it wasn't so much doubt. It wasn't doubt at all. It was, is there another explanation? Am I considering all the facts, all the possibilities? So from there, what ended up happening is that as time went on, those possibilities began to fall by the wayside, one after another, because of more knowledge, more understanding. And so it became more ordered and more understanding, to the point now to where I hear debates between Christians and atheists, and I often shake my head in wonder when I hear the argument, because I think these people, some of them have got degrees, they're master's degrees in biology and various things, and they still deal with God from the standpoint of religious practice. They never get away from that. It's always about the atrocities. It's always about those other things. So that for me, if you can separate that out and you can just start, okay, God, let's start. Okay, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. We just start there, and let's deal with that. Do we have all the evidence? Do we know exactly what happened in the beginning? Do we have every bit of knowledge that we need scientifically to be able to answer emphatically, in the beginning there was no God, and the earth came from, or the beginning came from nothing, and then there was a bang when the nothing exploded, and then the nothing went everywhere and began to form planets and various other. things. I mean, at some point, you're still having the same problem. You're not getting anywhere. So that's why there's still questions. And a investigation into the truth claims about God, not God of the gaps, but begin to put things together, because you start to see if you can go far enough to just simply consider the idea of a super intelligence and just start there. Even if we start after the Big Bang, and then put God into it. You still, at some point, you still have to, you can't escape design. You can try, but I don't think you can intellectually, honestly escape design. And I've read enough books by various evolutionists, and they always talk about how things were supposed to, which means that there was a plan.
So when you're talking about your experience, how long? Well, quick answer question: how long after you decided about, let's experiment with this God thing, did you actually become a Christian?
No, it was that night.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, it was that night.
Okay,
That was
all
the
right.
experiment.
Okay, perfect. So what? I mean, there's a lot of people, because you're talking about your experience, which makes your evidence a little bit more empirical. This is what I experienced, and so you're talking about things you've actually experienced personally. There's a lot of people in religion, in general, worldwide, that say they experience things and they don't follow the God of the Bible. Some of them are even polytheistic, and they experience things and go through these, physical experiences, mental experiences. And how do you look at that and say that, well, their experience is either not real or delusional or drug induced, or what, however you explain that away? What made you so lucky, or what makes anyone that experiences the God of the Bible so lucky to have that kind of empirical evidence?
When I get the answer to that question, I honestly believe the whole world will come to God. Because I don't have an answer to that question. I've been thinking about it very hard for 37 years. I don't think the element of science, intelligence, whatever you want to call it, knowledge, I don't think that is the real issue that keeps people from experimenting. Probably should qualify when I talk about experimenting. I'm not talking about conducting supernatural experiments.
Right. Well, we're still on
yeah.
the kind of the subject of chaos. So like I said, how do you?
The experimenting is read the Bible. Okay, that was my first experiment. Okay. Read the Bible before I tell everybody what's wrong with it. I thought that'd be a great place to start. Is to actually read it. I wish everybody would be that gracious to just read the Bible first before they decide that it's a stupid book and nobody should even pay attention to it.
So should you start Bible or should you start God? Because we're talking God and science. So because if you think about it, the Bible just you just start in the beginning. God's there. So
there's okay. So how to I'm trying to think of how to condense this answer rather than to go on forever. I'll just say it and then fix it afterwards. The Bible is the starting point for God. Okay, I know there are other holy books. The Bible is very distinctly different. The Bible doesn't try to prove the existence of God. The Bible doesn't try to prove that the God in that Bible is the it's not the way I want to say it. There are other people have gods. People have beliefs in gods. Okay, that's the Bible readily accepts that God of Molech, or Molech, the god of the child sacrifices and things like that. And and so you see these gods, Philistine gods, so forth. They had their gods that they believed in. The difference being is that the Bible's a history of God. It's a history of God. And so it's not starting out with the idea of saying this book was written to prove that this is the only true God. And so let's work our way through this. These are all false gods. This is the true God. It just starts off with just it's self. It's a done deal, basically. In the beginning, God. It doesn't say in the beginning was this God or that God or the other. In the beginning, God, and it just starts with God. So it talks about the idea of God, and goes on from there, and then history interweaves with God's history, and as you make your way through it, you may not agree. And this is the thing on my contention all the time. You may not agree with what the Bible says. You may not like what the Bible says, but you cannot deny its consistency all the way through. You can soundbite it and you can try to say, oh, see, these are contradictions by taking one soundbite out of context and comparing it to another soundbite out of context. But so the idea of experimentation I think has to start with what does the Bible say? What is it that the Bible actually says? And that was my first shock, is because when I started to read the Bible and start to understand the Bible, like I said, 16 years old was when I was first introduced. So from 16 to 21, so that 5 years, I had heard all kinds of things about Christianity, and was able to formulate an understanding of what I would call the commonly accepted idea of who God is. But then as I'm reading the Bible, I realize that even the Bible itself is contradicting those things. The Bible is describing these things and saying this is, basically this is garbage. I'm like, okay, how come people don't know this? How come people don't know this? And the only conclusion I could come to is because they just don't read the Bible. It has to come from their own ideas of who God is. And having talked to people over 37 years, I believe that most people, a very good portion of people, could I give it a percentage, maybe 70%, maybe even more, people don't read the Bible that claim to believe in God. They don't read the Bible, and the what they believe is, well, I believe, and it may be different from other people. And they've heard a scripture here or there, or they've heard somebody say something about something, but to actually sit down and read it. So that's what I mean when I say experimentation. Is I think that's where it needs to start.
So I heard a scientist. He said that. So we're just talking about the study of science again. He's a scientist from Arizona State University, and I believe he was quoting somebody else. I don't think this was his original quote, but he said, if you are a scientist and you're studying nature and you're studying the laws of physics, that you have to become an atheist before you enter the lab, and if you don't, you're no longer a good scientist. What's your response to that? In other words, to be a really good scientist, you can't possibly believe in God. That just doesn't make sense. So really, I guess the question is, does science refute God?
So that to me sounds like an argument for ignorance. That the more ignorant you are. So actually the ultimate scientist would be the one who goes into the lab, who doesn't know anything about science, period. That would be the ultimate unbiased, objective scientist. Is he can't think anything, he can't believe anything, he can't know anything, and then he goes in the lab. And we know that that's just silly, because you wouldn't be able to achieve anything in the lab if that was the case. And so to me, that sounds like an argument for ignorance, because having a belief in God is not understanding things. It's that your understanding has led you to that conclusion. I think the more you know about evolution in its finer details, the more you realize that we don't know very much in terms of concrete evidence, because the science actually poses more questions than it answers. So that's kind of a silly argument, I think.
So do you think that faith is a scientific thing?
No.
What is it?
No, it's not.
How do you explain faith, especially in the context of physical study? Because isn't faith kind of jumping for things you...
No, it's not that either. The biblical definition is faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Now, you might jump at that and say, well, see, that's just so ludicrous to even consider such a thing, that, okay, I'm gonna turn my eyes off. It's not that you're going to turn your eyes off. It's that your eyes are incapable. They're just incapable of the perception necessary. If you look at all the five senses, that all of our five senses, and then ask yourself the question, if we had a sixth or a seventh or an eighth or a 35th sense, would we be more perceptive or less? And my answer to that is we'd be more. The ways that you can perceive the world around you, the more in touch you are with the world. And so faith is another perception. Okay, it's not turning a blind eye to facts or anything like that. It's just nothing of the sort. It's completely the opposite. It's the idea of, I'm going to pursue this line of thinking even though my other senses cannot get involved. And so it's a more, not a less. And that argument, I hear that a lot. That argument that faith makes you less intelligent, it doesn't make you less intelligent. It makes you more perceptive, because it's beyond intelligence. It's beyond the senses. It's beyond all of those kinds of things. It goes beyond all those kinds of things. Scientists, not science, but, atheistic scientists, let me put it that way, they are reductionists. They want to reduce things, and they want to ignore the complexities. And I say that knowing that any atheist listening to this would laugh and say, no, that's exactly what I think about a Christian, is that Christians are reductionists. But it's not true. It's not true, because you won't find a Christian that is intelligent and is aware and understanding of things that will say, my Christianity forbids me to believe this scientific evidence. It's not, you can't do that. You just can't do that. I mean, that's not, that there's nothing righteous about that. There's nothing more godly about something like that. It's actually a contradiction. It's the other way around, because science, in my opinion, science is the discovery of God when it's all said and done. It's just the discovery of God and God's creation. You don't, just because you can see the majesty of God doesn't mean that you cannot see the majesty of his creation. And that's...
But the two are kind of separate, though.
No, they're
not.
The
majesty of God is like not bound by the laws of physics, whereas science is the study of
and
physics.
We are discovering that the world is not bound by the laws of physics.
Give me an example of that.
It's at a quantum level. When you talk about quantum mechanics, it just throws a wrench into physics. The ideas of the interactions of things that are unseen. Experiments that have been done that at talking about the idea. So one of the classics, is Schrodinger's cat. This is a classic, and I don't. We're really up at the edge of my knowledge. This is stuff I've read about, but I don't even pretend to understand quantum. I'm not there. I'm not even trying to go there, as much as just the things that I have read and am amazed by. It is amazing to me. But the whole idea is that I'll summarize it so it's just easier. You can't know the state of the cat until you open the box. And, if you think about that, because the assumption is that the opening of the box has a impact on the state of the cat. And that's the whole idea, is that you have a cat in the box, and the cat, you open the box and the cat's dead, But what you can't say is, you can't say that the cat was dead before you opened the box. And so, and this whole argument comes from it, there could have been a relationship between opening the box and the cat being dead. And so you have all these. I mean, and it's wonderful stuff. I'm not in any way trying to mock it or anything. It's wonderful stuff. It's amazing to consider. It's amazing to think about. But the thing to me that makes it so amazing is this: we haven't always thought like this. We haven't always thought about the interactions of things that we cannot see, that we cannot observe. And even when it comes to scientific experiments with in dealing with uh, um, evolution, uh, Darwin himself, it's right in the Origin of Species. Darwin basically says that this cannot be proven in a laboratory. End of story, period. And the reason is because immediately when you put it into the laboratory, it's game over because you've touched it. You've touched it, and now it's it's polluted. And so you can never get a pure result because it's been touched. Because of the naturalness has been lost. And so that to me is amazing. I went to a biosphere. It's called the Biosphere 2, the Biosphere 1 being the Earth. And it was amazing. Walking around, this is not a Christian event. And they're talking about all the failures of trying to make a second biosphere, things that they didn't even expect to happen. Like they didn't expect that the birds were going to eat all the bees and screw everything up. It's like, so now they had to hand pollinate the flowers. I mean, they literally had to walk around and be bees, because they didn't, it was like, oh crap. And then they had a termite problem in the rainforest. I mean, it's just, stuff like this is just like, you don't think about that. And you could say, oh, well, the answer is because the world is so big, the earth is so big. But no, the earth being bigger just makes that even more complicated, makes it even more difficult. How about if all the termites in the world made their way to the rainforest? I mean, it's like, we don't have control over these things, and to try to reproduce it in a fairly big building. I mean, it's not small. Can't even get close. I mean, it was a failure. It was an utter failure. Now I think it's been bought by Columbia University, if I remember correctly. And they just, because it's got all kinds of cool stuff in it and cool environments, they can test out theories and ideas and stuff independently. But it is not a biosphere anymore. It's still called Biosphere 2, but it's not. It's just not. And so that, so my point being is that the more we understand, the more difficult it becomes to create a world without God. And that's what I mean, is it's just amazing.
So what do you think about the difference between the age of the earth when it comes to what a lot of scientists are saying today and what a lot of Christians claim, or several thousand years old versus billions of years old? How do you, why is it that so many Christians believe in this young earth versus old earth thing?
I'll explain the beliefs, but I'll start off by just saying I'm not going to die on that battlefield. Young earth, old earth. I love, I never can remember the guy's first name. His last name is Turek. I like the way he said it. He said, as far as I know, this is a direct quote. He said, as far as I know, the world is 51 years old. I mean, and that really is the most honest, answer, really, when it comes right down to it, is we don't know. We don't emphatically know. We can suppose, we could take things into assumption, but we have to assume certain things. I have friends of mine who are Christians who work at universities and still fight with the whole idea of a young earth thing as being stupid. But then when on
the support or the opposition?
On the support of it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the earth is, listen, there's too much science out there that says that the earth is billions of years old. And so I start asking the questions. Okay, fine, but what is it? What do you think? How come you think that? And then they start using the classic measurements. And then I ask questions about it, and it's like they never even considered it in the first place. Like the salinity of the ocean. It had to have taken this long of a period of time for it to happen. Yes, if it started from zero. Now show me the evidence that we started with crystal clear water, no salt oceans. We don't have that. We don't have that evidence. We can see that there's a progression of saltiness over time, but that still doesn't mean that we start at ground zero of having no salt whatsoever. And so, and a lot of the calculations that are used, a lot of them are like that. They take basic. There's basic things that are the starting points. That they may not be the starting point. The starting point may be that the ocean was started at, I don't know what it is right now. I think it's 3 something. That it started at 2.5 or something like that. There's no evidence to say in the beginning the ocean was 2.5% salt. And so, and I'm not just using that one. And there's a lot of things like that. One of my biggest ones was, okay, how about this idea of light years? How do we work this idea of light years? And I've heard people say, well, maybe the speed of light isn't inconsistent. And I'm like, okay, that's a little hard. I mean, even though we do know that there, the potential that there could be variations, drastic variations are more difficult. But when I began to understand the science behind how we measure the distance of things according to light years, and realize that we're talking about calculations using an angle that is practically zero to start with. We're starting with an angle of near zero. I mean, very, very close to zero. Most people would see that number as approaching zero, and then say, this is how we got the distance of a thing being X number of light years away, which means that, at the speed that it's moving, and back to the Earth being billions of years old. And so my point in all that is to just simply say that it's the jury is still out on these things. The jury is still out. I don't think you have to have a young Earth in order to harmonize the Bible. Some of the young Earth arguments are valid. They're valid to consider. I mean, but they're not an end in themselves. The idea of a day, the night and the day. I think you have the same problem there, as you do with other things. We don't know, because we know that a day is the rotation of the Earth. We don't know that the Earth rotated 24 hours for one rotation. It doesn't say in the Bible, in the beginning, the Earth rotated 24 hours, made one day. So you have the same problems. You have the same unknowns, that there are unknown elements there. And it could very well mean a day is a day, and a night is a night, and the day and the night, and the morning and the evening were the first, all those kinds of things. But we don't, what if the Earth, a day, in the sense, maybe a day wasn't 24 hours, and so that's the problem, that's the issue.
But doesn't that put so much, pressure on the interpretation that man has had in the Bible over the years, that now we have this Bible that's being interpreted, and for, using the term we actually talked about earlier, dogma.
Yeah.
If to look at something like that and go, well, there's still question there.
Yeah.
Why not do that with the whole Bible?
Well, the Bible is not trying to answer the question of how long a day is.
Right.
It's not even pretending to answer the question. It never even answers the question, from the standpoint of here's the evidence of a day. It's because that's a side issue. It's a side issue. If the earth is 4 billion years old, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth is 4 billion years old, no problem. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth is 10,000 years old. No problem. Because the Bible only says in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. It doesn't add those additions. It doesn't say, and it's this old or that old or anything. And so there are a lot of, this is what I mean. This is what I'm talking about when I talk about these arguments that are being made about the existence of God, is really the existence of the God of the interpretation of Christianity. And you may be very well right that the God of interpretive Christianity doesn't exist. You may be 100% right, but you haven't answered the question. Because the question is, does God exist? That's the question is not, does the God that people interpret according to what they think they understand about God real? I would be willing to, if in that case, I would be on the atheist side. Because I don't believe in the God of interpretive religion.
I actually heard a guy the other day, was a scientist as well, and he said, I think that Christians are atheists when 99.9% of the gods, they are atheists just like us. And he said that it's just that one God that they're having a hard time not believing in. And so, anyway, I was wondering, what is, what is your response to the fact that so many intelligent or, uh, you know, prominent scientists and intellectuals, how is it that so many of them don't believe in God? If this is something that is discoverable, why is it so hard for people to get that?
Personal opinion. Exclusively personal opinion, having been a pastor in 4 different countries for 25 years. Personal opinion, because I've talked to a lot of people. I've talked to people with degrees, you know, Richard Dawkins type people. They don't want to. They start from the standpoint not of genuine curiosity that has been satisfied. It's not going to go there. Often what I hear is, okay, if we're going to talk about science, you have to exclude miracles. Okay, so we're not talking about God then. That's exactly, see, because miracles can't happen. Says who? Who says miracles can't happen? Well, science does. No, science doesn't say that. In fact, again, quoting from this guy Turek, I can't remember his last name, or first name, I mean. We have already seen one miracle, and everybody knows it's a miracle. I mean, we're still trying to figure out whether it's not a miracle, but we've been doing that for thousands of years now. The fact that we're here is a miracle. What are the odds? What are the odds of you and I sitting across from each other having this conversation? Billions and billions and billions. It is, from what I have read, the amount of variables. Okay, the amount of variables of elements, even all the elements, to be able to combine in the way they did. The correct answer is improbable. You can't even put a percentage on it. It's just improbable that this happened. Just the fact that we're here. And so for me, because of all the other elements, that the Bible talks about, is this something you really want to just kind of put on a shelf? And just kind of throw it away and say, yeah, when what we're actually pursuing, the chances of it actually happening, the idea of scientific evolution, the chances of it actually happening, and this is how we got here, are improbable. Do we really want to spend all of our effort, all of it, 100% of our effort on the purely after effects of what we can observe, what we can see, what we can test? Or is it worth it to go that one moment before and find out what happened there? Just that one moment before. Because no matter how you look at it, and my father-in-law is a believer in the idea of this multiverse idea. That's the multiple universes that's just been happening over and over and over and over forever. You're still talking about infinity. You're still talking about something that has always happened, that's not science. Science doesn't take into account that things have just always happened. It can't. We can only measure what we can measure through observation.
So you mentioned miracles, and this is actually on point with what you just said. Do you believe in miracles?
Absolutely.
But doesn't it kind of so how do you, you know, how do you just again remove? Okay, how about this? Why don't you just define miracles? What are miracles?
A miracle is a naturally occurring event that happens in a unnatural way. Like healing, for example. Somebody being healed, somebody raising from the dead. These kinds of things. These are possibilities. Somebody can be dead, and they can come back to life. We've seen this a lot. That's why when we pull somebody out of a swimming pool that's been there for a half an hour, we don't just throw them in a bag and then put them in a hole.
So why doesn't God do more things like that in front of people who don't understand or people who don't believe? Why does it seem like people that don't believe just seem to never see stuff like that?
Because then it wouldn't be faith.
So this is like we have to take a step before.
See, this is the thing. Anybody thinking, just logical thinking. If the premise is to take a step of faith to find what you're trying to find, and you say, not going to do it, what are you doing? How is that any different from saying, I'm not going to read a science book because I don't believe in science? How's that any different? Just because science has been attached to intellectual and faith has been attached to ignorant. Is that really the case? If you've never had faith, you are ignorant of faith, and you can't even comment because you don't know. You have no idea. You've never experienced faith. You don't know what faith is. You don't know how faith works. You don't know how faith operates. You have no idea what it is until you've actually done something by faith. You will never understand the dynamics of faith. And so this is, but we do this. We do take steps of faith. That needs to be said, is that scientists take steps of faith. It's called hypothesis. Hypothesis is a step of faith. You have enough understanding of things to think that this might be true, and so you make a hypothesis out of it. And then you start to experiment and to test that hypothesis to see if it's right. And that method works with God as well. It's just that those who refuse to do those kinds of things, they won't find it because they're not looking for it. It'd be like me saying I'm not going to go into the lab and watch an experiment about some particular thing that I disagree with, because if I do see it, I'm not going to believe it anyway.
So there's the process of scientific discovery often involves something you can repeatable evidence.
Yeah.
And so, is that a possibility with God? Is this just this thing you can? So once you take the step of faith and you see it work once, is that something that will just keep repeating? And so, or is there a chance it's just a fluke?
To parallel the scientific experimentation, you have to repeat something enough times to establish the pattern, first of all. So you don't know if you don't just say, this is what we think, and then you go do an experiment and the experiment comes out the way you had hoped it would, and just say, that's it, it's over. No, you have to do it again, and you have to screw things up a bit. You have to, what if we take this out, or what if we tweak this, or what if we do that, or what if we inject this into it, or what if we leave this out? What happens next? To establish a pattern so that we can say, okay, this theory now has been proven because we have been able to put it to the test. Now, what do you do when you test something? You have to beat on it. You don't just try one thing. You beat on it. And so if you will do that with God, you will find the pattern.
So what is the process you would say to, I'm somebody that's listening to what you're saying, and you're saying that there is a process to discovering God?
Yes.
Okay. And
well,
so what?
yes and no.
Okay. Maybe you can clarify.
I'm trying to
that in the question or in the answer to the question. But what would you tell somebody is the process for discovering God? What's step one? Hypothesis. Okay, maybe God's real.
Okay, the process has to be
We have like 1 minute.
right. I know you have to be open to it. I mean, you have to be open to the possibility that this is the case. It has to become a hypothesis. Okay, God could be real. You have to start there. If you don't start there, if you're going to start with God's not real and there's nothing you can do to say to prove it to me otherwise, we're done. We're done. And it's the same thing with science. It's not even going to be different. So there has to be that element. You have to be willing to make a hypothesis and then start testing that hypothesis. But the test of that hypothesis has to be with the known values that we have, like the Bible, prayer, repentance, these kinds of. You have to go with those things, the things that promise relationship with God, the things that promise God to reveal Himself. If you're not going to go with those things, then you're not going to find God. So you have to use the tools that have been made available to us, just like you would in science.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed. We appreciate you coming tonight. We are out of time.
No questions. What's up with
No
that?
questions. Any last-minute questions? No, sorry, it's too late.
Yeah, you're too
a whole
late.
hour.
Sorry, you had your chance.
Never mind. Anyway, we do welcome you guys to come back next week. And for those of you that are watching, invite somebody to come. Anybody that has questions about Christianity, anybody that has questions, we post the topics a few days before these. So I think they're posted on Saturday, right? The actual topic is posted Saturday.
I think so. I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, it's posted a few days before. You can just, if you click the alarm bell on your YouTube screen, you can actually get notified when these are coming up. And so you can see that ahead of time. If you have questions that are on topic, please bring them. We want your questions. We invite your questions. And as we said, all we ask is that you just keep it pertinent and related to the subject that we're talking about already. And we do appreciate you guys coming. We really are glad you're here. And we will see you guys next week.